Hello all, this is Halloween, and if you enjoy visiting cemeteries and learning some about the history of those at rest in these cemeteries, you may want to subscribe because I'm going to be taking you somewhere new every week. In today's episode, we will be visiting the Laurel Grove South Cemetery. This is an African American cemetery established in 1853. Enjoy! We're here at Laurel Grove South Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia, established in 1853. It's a beautiful day and it's quiet in this cemetery, and it looks like we've got the cemetery all to ourselves. Let's go in and see what we can see. At first glance here, it looks like there's a lot of notable people laid to rest in this cemetery. So we've got some reverends here listed, showing you which direction in which they're buried. Now this, I was reading on this historic sign, and I'll read it to you, originally was an African American cemetery. This is the south section of the original Laurel Grove North Cemetery, in which the North Cemetery actually has a lot more of the famous congressmen, Medal of Honor recipients, the man who wrote Jingle Bells. Laurel Grove South Cemetery. It says in 1853, the city reserved 4 acres in the new Laurel Grove Cemetery for Savannah's African American community. This new burial ground replaced an older black cemetery located near Whitefield Square. Pastors Andrew Bryan, First Colored Baptist Church, and Henry Cunningham, Second Baptist Church, were among those whose bodies were moved to the new location. Here are buried many of Savannah's prominent black leaders, educators, civic community leaders, masons, politicians, entrepreneurs, and religious leaders. Later increased in acreage by the city, it continues in use today, so this is an active cemetery. Erected by Georgia Historical Society, the Friends of Laurel Grove South Cemetery, and Waters Foundation Incorporated. So let's take a look. Immediately and right off the bat, it's not as colorful and scenic as the Bonaventure Cemetery was. And I do notice quite a few newer headstones in here. Let's come in here and check it out, though. There's a lot of old headstones as well. So these are all marked by street. We got A Street, B Street, C Street. I see some really unique wrought iron fence. That are containing looks like a family plot, probably. That's pretty. I love that sort of filigree design of the wrought iron. There's a lot of that in here, it looks like, so that's really cool. They don't make them like that anymore. Wow, so cool. And these headstones you cannot read anymore, which is a shame. Now, unless the script is on the other side, but usually the script would face the burial, and it looks just like it's been worn off. Nope, this one's the other way, so still can't read it. It's very light, weathered. That's still very cool. Wow, the look of the cemetery is a bit morose and kind of drab when we've seen really beautiful ones like Bonaventure. There's still a beauty to it. There's all these trees around that makes it really nice. Just not a lot of flowers or plants or anything like that. It's pretty dull as far as that goes, but a lot of really neat. Look at this. A brick above ground plot. Again, all of the writing's been worn off. so you can't read who's laid to rest there. So just a gorgeous day. Really pretty. Here is one of the more significant burials in here. It is a reverend, the Reverend Edward L. Ellis Jr., born in Monroe, Georgia, October 11th, 1932, and passed away June 4th, same day as my mom. Wow, same day as my mom, June 4th, 2020, in Savannah, Georgia. Wow, that's incredible. It's almost like a sign that she's also here too. But it says years served, January 1st, 1985 through March 13th, 2011. It says loving husband, devoted father, and balanced, impactful, gentle grandfather. He was a true and faithful shepherd of God's flock. He made his calling and election sure, exhibited full proof of his ministry, always loved and forever missed by all. This was erected by historic First Bryan Baptist Church, which was established in 1773. It was one of the first all-black church congregations in America, and it was significant because a lot of those started popping up around that time in the 1700s, mostly here in Savannah, Georgia. Now, I wouldn't say a lot, a few of them. And it was in those churches that they started to kind of rail against oppression and really give the black community the support and backing they needed to kind of fight the oppression that they were enduring at that time. His favorite scripture was 1 Corinthians 13:13. Says, last sermon towards love, the more excellent way. Matthew 22:34 through 40. We'll have to look that up. I do mean to read my Bible more this year. I'm just not much of a reader, so I actually bought a book on this trip that I know I'll put on the bookshelf and I'll never read, probably. But I actually have a collection of haunted places books. So when we go somewhere that's haunted, like Savannah or St. Augustine, I have a book on that, about the hauntings in these places. It's pretty cool. So if I ever get the urge to, read, the Bible is number one, and then maybe I'll crack open some of those haunted books. Right here in this above ground plot, you can see right here, all made of brick. Very cool. Very different. A historic way to be buried. I don't know exactly the style that is called, but you see this a lot. You see it in St. Augustine. We saw it at the Colonial Park Cemetery here in Savannah. That style of burial was very popular back then. You can even see some of that in the Oak Lawn Cemetery in Ybor City. So, says this tablet is erected to record the demise of the Reverend Henry Cunningham, founder and subsequent pastor of the Second African Church for 39 years, who yielded his spirit to its master on the 28th March 1842, aged 83. With uniting with unitiring, I don't know what that word means. I'll have to look it up. With unitiring zeal, he dispensed the gospel of Jesus Christ to his people, to which thousands within whose memory his virtues live, will testify. And this below here is his wife, Miss Betsy Cunningham. And she left us in 1838 at the age of 98. They both lived very long, prosperous lives. That's what Jesus will do for you. Look at this. This looks like an original headstone. That maybe they later built this sort of larger memorial. That's what I think that might be. 1829. So this is one of the bodies that was exhumed from the original black cemetery and brought here to Laurel Grove South, which is why they have earlier dates than 1853 when this cemetery was established. So so this one here passed in 1829, for example. So, and that is Andrew Marshall. Let's see what it says over here. Andrew Bryan and Andrew Marshall. And then Henry Cunningham, which we just read about. So yeah, these were of the bodies that were exhumed from the original black cemetery. So this was probably just a headstone and regular burial before they came over here, brought the bodies over here, created this beautiful brick monument, and placed, you know, replaced the bodies inside the monument, which is kind of cool. Reverend Andrew Bryan. And then DEA Deacon. Okay. Samson Bryan. Of the First Bryan Baptist Church, which I believe I did photograph. I'll put a photo right here for you. And I also photographed the historic marker in front of the church. That tells you all about, you know, it was one of the first all black churches in America. You know, it's a pretty big deal. We talked about this, these beautiful signals with the hand gestures on the headstone. So this one in particular, with the hand pointing up like this, means basically heaven bound, like I'm hope to be going to heaven, sort of thing. And this is a Miss Rosa Law, our sister. Very brief. Died July 12th, 1892. Aged 65 years, it looks like. So yeah, a ton of old headstones in here. I haven't actually seen a whole lot of new ones, but there definitely are, being that it's still an active cemetery. Look at this. Isn't this cool? Look at the design on this fence. It looks like a harp. It's kind of neat. Different. Something I've never seen before. I like that. Cemeteries are so cool. They're like art museums in a lot of ways. I thought this looked pretty cool right here. And look. It says slaves' burials. That's wild to me. Talk about history, you know. Look at this. And while the headstones are modest, they got a headstone. I've been to some, like Rosewood Cemetery, for example, out there in Cedar Key or near Cedar Key. They just had a shell and they're marked unknown. But these look like they actually had headstones, which is kind of a cool thing, and seemingly rare. I've seen most slave burials are marked with shells or just wooden crosses that deteriorate over time. Some of them just aren't marked at all. So this is a really rare find, really neat, so cool. The headstones are really old, so you can't, unless the script is on the other side here. Looks like the script would be on this side, yeah. You still can hardly read it, but for them to have had at least something to mark their graves with their names on it, that's pretty awesome. Here's one I can read, kind of. Kendra, is it Kendra? Menorah? I don't know how the first, no, it's hard to read. I'm gonna take pictures of it and maybe we can read it better in a picture, but it's hard to make out the script, but at least it's there. That's so cool. This is just too much. This is not something I thought I was gonna run into here. heavy standing in this spot, to be honest. But I think that's just so cool. Never expected that anything like that. Some of the plots are in not great shape. It seems like there could be a lot of damage just from weather here. Now, you wouldn't believe to look at it right now, but it was snowing here just 2 weeks ago. And there's a lot of trees that have been knocked over and things like that. So they might have pretty inclement weather here sometimes in Savannah that's causing some of this damage. Like this one, for example. I mean, these rods are bent in some places. Right here, the tombstone and all of the concrete along with it has been broken by something. Could be vandalized too. I don't know. Not really sure. In some places, vandalism is a problem. A lot of times in historic cemeteries, you know, young kids come in here trying to be cool, summon spirits or whatever, and even sometimes do nefarious things like vandalism. So there's no telling where the damage come from, but I'm sure some of it has to do with weather. We have a Monroe mausoleum here. I wanted to check it out. Let's see what it looks like inside. Oh, wow. There's just a headstone there. Looks like there's inserts here, full body inserts inside the wall. 12 of them. That's pretty wild. It's just wide open. A.M. Monroe. Thank you for joining us today. That does it for this one. I'll see you at the next one. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I hope you loved today's episode. I thought it was a really fascinating cemetery with a lot of things that I've never seen before. As you know, we've visited a lot of African American cemeteries, and there were some firsts in this cemetery, like the slavery graveyard, but they actually had headstones. Now, back in those times, in most states, a slave grave would be almost unmarked, likely using wooden markers, shells, household items, or something like that to mark the grave. And then eventually, over time, if it's a wooden cross marker, that wears out, it rots, and then eventually it becomes a completely unmarked grave. Shells and household items get misplaced, get weathered and destroyed, and eventually those become unmarked graves. But to have seen a slave burial ground with actual headstones with the names of the slaves and any writing at all was a very unusual thing. My cat Nico's hanging out with us. It's all good. Anyway, she's a cutie pie. She's actually a Hemingway cat. She's got like the 6 toes on each foot. It's only on her front feet, but it's adorable because it looks like a little mitten or something. Anyway, back to my point. It was a really interesting cemetery, and I'm so glad that we visited it. Like I said, it's a little more, it's not as scenic as the others, but it is just after winter. They have had some snow, so the grass isn't real green. You know, it's probably, a lot of it's due to the weather, but there also wasn't like a lot of plants and flowers and different things like that. There were a lot of oak trees, you know, the laurel oaks. It was still pretty in its own right, in its own way. So it piqued my interest a little bit to kind of find out a little bit more about slavery and perhaps why Georgia did have headstones for their slaves and other states didn't. And it might have something to do with the fact that Georgia was actually the first U.S. state to take steps towards abolishing slavery. They weren't the first to abolish slavery, but they did have these, black-only churches and things like that who were actually active in those efforts to try and end slavery. Massachusetts was actually the first U.S. state to abolish slavery in 1783. And Vermont, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire followed shortly after that. So basically like the New England states were the first. But I think that maybe these states had gone a little lighter on their slaves or treated them a little more like family or something to that effect. To have in that time allowed all of this, taking measures to get rid of it and stuff. So that was kind of cool to learn, I think, and Georgia was one of those states as well, with having the first all black churches and stuff. But anyway, I found out a little history for you. Again, Savannah is a great place to visit, and I have a little bit more from Savannah coming up for you in the coming weeks. Stay tuned. That does it for today's episode. If you haven't already, please remember to like, subscribe, and share the video, and I'll see you next time.